This is a powerful
We're
new
going to
concept.
revolutionize
It's
voice
really all
messages
about
where we
data
want to
collection and analysis.
We need to have an active
Fresh
voice.
ideas are what we
A
fresh
passive
ideas
voice
are what
won't
we
get us
really
where we
need.
want to go.
You are listening to Active Voice with your host Llewellyn King.
Hello, I'm Llewellyn King, your host for this broadcast. I'm joined by an extraordinary mind, a man who has delved very deeply, very early on, into artificial intelligence and its impact on many industries. Today in particular, I want to talk to him about its likely impact on medicine. He is David Derigiotis, president of Brokerage and head of insurance at Flow Specialty. And David, welcome to the broadcast, and quickly tell us about Flow, because it's not self-explanatory by name.
Thank you, Llewellyn. Absolute pleasure to be here with you. Flow Specialty is an AI-driven wholesale insurance broker that focuses on professional liability, management liability, and cyber risk. We're really changing the way service and expertise is offered within the wholesale space, utilizing artificial intelligence to provide deep information, deep insight, analysis on every single proposal, quote that we provide to our clients. We've been around for about 3 years now, are experiencing incredible growth. And again, the value proposition is the way that we utilize AI with very experienced brokers.
Now, tell me about, obviously, insurance is concerned with health. A large part of health, of the health provision in the country is insurance. And in any country, insurance is a part of the health structure. Even if it's a state system, it's still part of the health structure, as it is with Medicare and Medicaid in the US. So tell me about where AI fits into health.
Yeah, I mean, you got it. AI can be used in so many different facets in terms of chopping up, consuming, and providing information around data. And you have to think about the hundreds of millions of people that are across the United States or even worldwide, for that matter. The amount of information that's collected on all of us, think of the wearables that we have, think about the information that we provide to health insurers. Flow's not in that space, but we're talking about incredible amounts of data. What type of genetic issues individuals have, chronic diseases that people have, life expectancy. Artificial intelligence can be used to analyze all of these things, detect patterns, and then come up with solutions. So it's really limitless in terms of what can be done within the healthcare space.
There's huge concern about the impact of AI on other aspects of life, but the best hope for its huge addition to the human experience, its huge and creative addition, is in health. It looks as though medicines will get better, prognosis will get better, predictive analysis will become very reliable. Is that true?
It is. I think artificial intelligence will have tremendous impacts, not only across multiple industries, but if you look at the greatest benefit that can be offered to two particular sectors, healthcare, which we're certainly talking about, and education. I think those are two areas where significant improvements can be provided and given to all individuals who have an opportunity to come into contact with it. But talking about health, it makes me think of a story that was here in Michigan, where I am. Last year, a mother had taken her son to see 17 different doctors over the course of several years. None of them were able to give a diagnosis in terms of the condition that the young boy had. He was experiencing incredible pain. He would take a step forward and kind of drag his other foot behind, and he was having issues in terms of growth spurt issues. After collecting all of this information, seeing 17 different doctors, kind of feeling hopeless at that point, she turned to ChatGPT. And what she did was she put some of the imaging information in there and all of the notes that were taken. ChatGPT did an analysis of it, and it gave a diagnosis. She then went to see a neurosurgeon about the diagnosis that ChatGPT gave, and the neurosurgeon concluded that it was accurate after they ran some additional tests. Now, I'm certainly not recommending that people turn to ChatGPT or any type of LLM that's trained generally across every different segment of information that you can think of, but it shows the power of what can be done. Analyzing huge amounts of data, being able to detect patterns, and then being able to provide a quality of care and accuracy around a diagnosis or treatment. And I'll tell you, Llewellyn, being in the space that I'm in over the last couple of years, I've seen applicants, I've seen businesses apply for specialty insurance within the AI segment in about every different facet of healthcare you can imagine. I've seen all sorts of telemedicine and telehealth companies come through. I've seen drug development and research companies come through, home health, anything you can imagine that touches a patient, that analyzes biometric information, that's prescriptive in terms of healthcare. It's a real growth area right now, and it's only going to get bigger.
I'm especially interested in myalgic encephalomyelitis, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, or for shorthand ME or ME-CFS, which is a debilitating immune deficiency syndrome, a disease of the immune system, and very little is known about it. But the impacts on individuals are huge. Often it breaks out after exercise or flu. So the initiation can be one of those, or it can be something quite different. But the legacy, and it's very closely tied to long-haul COVID, the tail of COVID infection, which goes on forever. The symptoms are particularly ghastly. They are constant fatigue and inability to handle any kind of exercise. Post-exertional malaise is the term they like to use. And people are essentially live for a long time under glass, unable to work, unable to have proper lives, unable to maintain normal relationships, and unable to maintain marriages or relationships akin to marriages. And the suffering is huge. The financial impact is devastating. I've heard terrible stories about people who live in cars, and I'm hopeful that artificial intelligence will lead the way out of this, as it is pointing to other diseases. And one of the things, and I think you just said it, I think the backstory of what you just said is that this person with a sick son went to ChatGPT, but what she did was break down silos. And this is awfully important because medicine is full of silos, whether it likes to admit it or not.
It is, and that's a problem. You have to make sure that the data that is being trained on and it has access to is very broad. And you can certainly break down silos and providing all sorts of information on all sorts of different patients, getting a good, well-rounded sample size that it can study and have access to. You're going to get the best results when the data is very far-reaching in that type of context. You can run into issues, though, if it doesn't have the diversity that it needs to make those decisions. If a particular group, particular region, whatever it may be, is very limited, then of course the results may not always be accurate. But again, that's where artificial intelligence really can shine. If the data set is strong, if it's diverse, it loves data, it loves information, and it can consume an incredible amount of it. If you feed in the right data set to these types of LLMs, it will be able to give probably the best results possible. I mean, there have been a number of studies already where they have taken a look at human doctors, people, and then they've taken a look at the responses from different LLMs, different AI systems. And the responses that were given by the LLMs were stronger, more empathetic, and more accurate at times than what the actual human doctors were providing. So it's all about the data.
And we know that, and bad data produces bad consequences, which has frightened people off AI. But it seems to me that there are three areas here that are related but separate. First of all, is off-label uses. If a drug developed for one thing, and there are hundreds of thousands of drugs that have been developed by the pharmaceutical industry, and before that by ordinary village medicine, if you will, that have uses for diseases that they've never been applied to. And that artificial intelligence, the example I like to quote, largely because it's easy to understand, is thalidomide, disastrous for pregnant women, but very helpful in treating other diseases, particularly Parkinson's. How do we burrow into this huge body of knowledge about pharmaceuticals and find the drug that might fit a disease where it has never been tried heretofore?
Yeah, Llewellyn, I don't want to say it's simple, but there's a process to do that. And it's how our organization uses data. We're very specific in the type of data that we train on. It's very unique to insurance, but then we drill it down further from there. The insurance that we specialize in is cyber risk. It's professional liability. It's D&O, management liability. So we drill down and it's very specific. We want it to be an expert in these particular areas. And you have to do the same exact thing. When you're talking about medicine, anything healthcare related, you want to make sure the data that you're feeding it is relevant and specific to the industry, the segment, the pharmaceutical space that you're in. That's where you're going to get the best results. Because again, any one of us can run over to ChatGPT and it's been trained on an incredible amount of information. It's scoured the internet. It's looked at websites. It's studied books, anything, videos, artwork that it can get its hand on, certainly articles. So you can go there and it's kind of a generalized expert across the board. But if you try to drill down in very specific things, you might get an okay response. Maybe it's right some of the time, but it's not going to be the same type of output or desired results compared to a model that's trained exclusively on that. It's run all of the scenarios. It's look at all of the different outcomes. It's accessing different neurons, if it's deep learning, and it's correcting itself and it gets better. And you have quality assurance. You have people that are there overseeing the process, correcting it over time as well. So having the right QA and guardrails is certainly important. But you take any one of these models and give it data that's very specific, and if it's a large data set, you'll get the type of results with refinement over time that you hope to. And that's what the promise of medicine, any type of AI that's being developed in this space promises or hopes to give all of us. It's deep expertise and accessibility that will be accurate and that will help improve the overall quality of care that we can all expect within medicine over the next 5 to 10 years.
You are listening to Active Voice with your host Llewellyn King.
Second category is therapies, which is related to the research that can be done on pharmaceuticals, but particularly with therapies, things that work for people. I found with MECFS, bringing it back to that, that different people get relief from different things, largely, which is not medical, but psychological, pets, animals. One woman wrote what became a bestseller about just studying a snail. She was so sick that she had a snail in a glass container beside her bed, and she studied it. She became a friend. She communicated with it, as it were. Other people find cats very helpful. Dogs are more of a problem because if you're ill, unfortunately, they're more demanding. They have to be taken out for walks, etc. And one patient found immersing herself totally in ice water in a lake helped. It seems to me that artificial intelligence can examine these things and find out what the psychological or medical background is. So therapies are important, and things that have worked elsewhere for other people, which is always important. How will we find that with AI?
Yeah, that's again another great question, and it comes down to how are you prompting for responses? It comes down to all of the different variables, because what works for one individual may not necessarily work for another, and that's exactly what you've described. But the thing that artificial intelligence can do is it can look at every single scenario that's provided, and it can come up with an outcome and run it many different times. So you take all of the different variables, what time of day, you're talking about somebody studying a snail, what was the living condition, when were they doing it, what was the environment that they were in, what was the individual's age, race, all of those things. So it can take every single variable imaginable, and it can run an analysis, and it can do it against every other person that you're providing information to. So it cross-references, it runs different checks, it analyzes, one person to the next, to the next, to the next, and it looks for a variety of outcomes that have taken place. The computer has the ability to do that and not forget. It's much harder for an individual. Think of one physician, think of one doctor, one home health aide, one personal trainer. How many people can they possibly see over the course of their time practicing medicine or being involved in whatever area of health that they're in? What's the likelihood that they may forget certain nuances or certain details? The programs won't forget those things, and you can feed it with hundreds or thousands or millions of files. So that's what it comes down to. It will look at and dissect every scenario. It will look at and dissect every possible outcome, and it will provide information based on all of the things that it's analyzed. That's what the hope of AI can do. It's a more refined and a strong assessment of all of the data that you're giving it.
The final area that I wanted to talk about is predictive diagnosis, where AI can now tell with surprising accuracy who is likely to get Alzheimer's, up to 80% accuracy. I'm told. I'm not personally an expert, but I certainly study it as much as I can. That is a mixed blessing, isn't it? Because it can introduce huge anxiety. If, for example, there is an absolute link between osteoporosis and Alzheimer's, people who get osteoporosis maybe 30 years ahead of getting Alzheimer's are going to be under huge psychological pressure. They're going to be in a very bad emotional place. And predictive medicine has that effect. We're all going to die, but we don't actually want to know when.
That's it, and that's where my head went, Llewellyn. It's if somebody told you when and how you were going to die, would you want to know that? The thing with predictive medicine, it can absolutely identify patterns, and it can identify links, like you talked about osteoporosis. It can certainly evaluate bone density and look at what the likely outcome down the line of that being linked to, some other type of disease or being a precursor for a particular disease. It doesn't guarantee or mean with certainty that the person will over time develop that. So you certainly get into accuracy issues as well. And this is going to take many years for these programs, for the capability to be refined. We have years and years worth of past data, certainly, that can be fed in and analyzed and be used to make improvements and have at least a strong correlation, have a strong accuracy level. But again, what about those times when it does get it wrong? It is a burden that sits on top of you, if it is making some type of prediction. And that's where having the right guardrails is so important as well. You want to make sure that the data that it has access to is good data, it's accurate, and it has good quality assurance around it. Because you can certainly go in, any one of us, you're just using, again, ChatGPT or Claude, any of the LLMs that are available now. You can type in a question and it will give you an answer with a high level of confidence, whether it's right or wrong. It doesn't matter. I've seen plenty of responses that have come back with certainty and with confidence where you think that sounds great. I'm getting a very confident response back. That has to be accurate, but it was completely wrong. And if you get that wrong in asking a simple question, not a big deal. If you get that wrong and you're talking about anything health related, there's certainly a new level of anxiety that's introduced. There can certainly be issues with any type of preventative steps that people want to take, whether it's medication or lifestyle changes. Those have much more significant implications if they're incorrect. So I think it's important that this is in early stages right now. It is being done right now, but there still is a ways to go to make sure that it is perfected and it is giving very accurate results.
I'm giving talk on AI and medicine in a few weeks, but I know already what one of the questions will be when we get to the Q&A section. That will be, what about hallucinations? What about the errors that you've just mentioned? And I think it's very important for people who are self-diagnosing through ChatGPT or one of the others, Copilot, whatever, that they understand that the answer they get isn't necessarily correct and should be checked against another system. I found when I know the answer to something and I've asked about it, I've ever found what has come out to be more complete than my knowledge, to be exquisitely stated, or quite remarkably wrong, and also to reflect the bias of the time. I've had a long life in different countries, and looking at different political figures from the past, they're all judged through a certain bias of the time, and they're not accurate because of that. The bias overwhelms the facts, and I think people should be aware of that. But overall, this is a very exciting time, isn't it?
It is. Some of the research that I've done as well, Llewellyn, is more people are turning online. More people are going online for their medical questions and the advice that they're seeking. One of the stats that I saw was 7% of all Google searches were health related or medical related. And more than half of people that have sought medical care have started online. So they are looking for answers. They are looking for guidance. But again, as you mentioned, you have to be very careful. You have to be concerned about bias. You have to be concerned about inaccuracies and hallucinations. Because as I mentioned, when you turn to AI, it will give you a response with a high level of confidence that makes it seem as if it knows the answer and it's got it and you can trust that. But it's certainly not the case. And another thing is you can type in a number of symptoms online. And I think anybody who's ever tried to self-diagnose or look for information online, you can type in almost anything. You can have a simple cold and you can get responses or information back that will make it seem as if you're dying of some, incredible disease that's out there. So that also has to be weighed against all of the different information that's accessible. You need to know, is the program that you're going to, or is the outlet that I'm going to accurate? And as you mentioned, what's the bias? What's the time that in the context in which, I'm searching for this and I'm dealing with this? Because you can have symptoms based on what the weather is, what the time of the season might be. Is there enhanced tree pollen that's causing something? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're dying of some type of respiratory illness. It could just be you're suffering from allergies. So I think it's important to understand and to encompass all of those things, whether it's the environment that you're in, the time of day, what you had for breakfast, how much sleep you got last night, because that all plays in to the results that you may be getting and how you're feeling.
I should have mentioned that you are a TED talker, and that if you go online, there's a very fine talk you gave as part of the TED series, and people will want to look at that. I will want to talk to you again. I hope we can make a regular appointment discussing these things on this program. And I certainly think that the one thing that did come out of the last few minutes was, when doing something on the web, take care. Don't not do it, but do take care.